data that can be divided into categories based on the attributes of the data. Okay, so what does the word attributes mean? Guys, what does the word attribute mean?
Like a characteristic.
Like a characteristic, right? So like you could sit on the other side if that's easier to see. For some reason that desk is turned, so I'm supposed to be that way. Well, it's supposed to be here.
Why is this desk different than every other desk?
Okay, it's like marker. Okay, anyway, so it's like an attribute. So like you could say an attribute of me is like I have brown hair, I have brown eyes, I'm short, whatever. Okay. So we can also talk about things about data. Categorical data can be summarized in 3 ways. Okay. Basically, we're going to do this 3 different ways. We're going to do it with the mode. So there's an old word, right, that we haven't talked about in a while. Relative frequency. And a percent bar graph. Okay, so 3 different things. One thing we already know, and the other 2, they're not hard. We're piecing together information that we learned in the past to now with something we're learning currently, okay? So let's remember the mode. The mode is the category that occurs the most, okay? So if you look at this one right here, it was number of students per instrument. So you can tell that if we want to summarize the data using the mode, what would you say it is looking at this table? You have the table on your notes too. Are you sure? Okay, so there's 2 different schools of thought. I heard one group say that it's 3 because that's the number that you see the most often, but then I heard drums because it was the thing that was the most popular. Well, basically, you need to ask yourself what's being asked here. The question is the number of students per instrument, right? So basically, when we talk about the mode here, we mean the most popular. The most popular thing that's happening. The greatest number of students play the drums, so that's the mode. Okay, so I know that might be a little bit confusing because, excuse me, when we talked about the mode before, it was the number that occurred the most often. But that's because you need to stop and think about what the data is. In this case, what would have been the question posed to this group of students? What would have been their question asked? What instrument do you play, right? And so if you were walking in, I would be starting to collect data. I would say bass, 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 cello, 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 right? You see what I'm saying? And so once I listed it all out, when I got down to the drums, that would have happened 16 times. And when you looked at the whole list of all the data, you would have seen that the drums would have been the most often piece of data. Does that make sense? This is just how often it happened. So it happened 3 times. It happened 4 times. This is number of occurrences, if you will. Okay, so try not to get those 2 things confused. I know we had the same discussion in second period. Okay. Number 2 says find the percent that represents the mode for the data. So based on what we've learned this week, how could you solve that? Okay, so discuss that with a neighbor. Okay, so where do you start with this one? If I'm looking for a percent, notice we already have the proportion set up, right? And you've learned earlier in the week that this is part over whole equals percent out of 100, right? So what is the other parts that we know? We know that drums represents 16, right? Where does that go? And the part. What else do we know? Yeah, we had to add, right? We had to add all these numbers up to get a total of what? 40. Where does that number go? On the bottom. Now what? I would simplify as well. What would you divide by? 2. You could. Either you could do 2, you could do 5, you could do 4. It doesn't matter. Okay? You could do 8. So there is really a lot. I don't know why I saw 4 because I was trying to get to 10 because that to me was easier. But it doesn't really matter. You're still going to get the same thing, right? Which is 40%. So the answer to the question would be 40%. Let's see if that's reasonable. 16 out of 40. Well, tell me what half of 40 is. 20. So is 16 kind of close to 20? Is 40 kind of close to, I'm sorry, 50. Yeah, 50%? Yeah. So therefore, that's reasonable. Okay? Anybody have questions about mode? All right, let's move on to relative frequency. When we say this word relative, we don't mean like aunts and uncles, right? Everything is relative. Like if I said, you got 20 questions right on your quiz, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends, that's right. Because if there were 20 questions on the quiz, that's a great thing. But if there were 500 questions on the quiz, then that's not good, right? Because that means you would have only gotten like 5% or something. Okay? So, relative frequency says it is the ratio of a number of times a category is represented to the total pieces of data. This word ratio, this is a new vocabulary word for us. A ratio is just when we compare two quantities. Like if I'm looking at this group of students right here, and I wanted to compare a ratio of girls to boys, what would I say? It's 3 to 1, because there's 3 girls sitting here and 1 boy. Does that make sense? If I said I wanted to have a ratio of boys to the total, then that would be what? 1 to 4, because there's 1 boy and a total of 4 of you guys. Does that make sense? Okay, so what we're going to do, though, is we're going to make a ratio of the number of times that it happens to the total. All right, so here's a table. It says it shows the number of students that speak various languages, determine the relative frequency for each state. Remember to set up proportions, and we've already got it started for you, okay? So 2 students spoke Arabic. Out of how many? What do we need to do? Yeah, we need to get a total here. So 2 plus 15, 17 plus 6, 23 plus 27, 50, that's right. So it's out of 50, which is nice because if I'm trying to make it as a percent, what do I want my denominator to be? 100. So then that would be what?
4
Times 2, which is 4 out of 100, which would be 4%, or 0.04. Once you make sure you understand both of those ways written are acceptable, because it depends on what they're looking for. It could be a percent, it could be a decimal. Okay? Let's do French. French was how many?
15.
15 out of 50. So then how many out of 100 would that be?
30.
Times 2, so that would be 30. Okay, go ahead and finish the other 2. So you might be asking a question to yourself right now, like, what's this about? Like, when would this be useful? Can anybody maybe make a conjecture here? When would this be useful? Like, what's the point? What do you think? If we were wondering, what might we be wondering, and this information might be helpful. Come on, guys, think. Radio silence right now. Come on, guys. How perhaps maybe where this state is that they're speaking this, right? Because when I look at it and I see that Spanish was the most popular, and then French, I don't know about you, but it doesn't make me think that it's a state like Montana, right? I'm thinking probably not. Montana's probably not 54% Spanish and 30% French. What do you think? So somebody in second period said New Mexico too. New Mexico might be a good guess. What else might be a good guess? That's what I said. I thought Louisiana. Spain is not a state. I thought Louisiana as well, because it's right next door to Texas. So, we have a huge Spanish in Texas, but then Louisiana has a huge French as well. So that was my guess as well. But I don't really know for sure. And so there might be, this could also vary, obviously, by the region. Because like some parts of Texas would look different than other parts of Texas, right? For example, if we were to go further down to the valley, right, like southern, like Brownsville, what is probably going to increase? Why? Because you're really close to what? Mexico. It's right across the river there. And so, of course, that percentage is probably going to be a lot higher, okay? All right, so now that you know relative frequencies, you can now make what's called a percent bar graph, okay? A percent bar graph is not like a normal bar graph, guys. A normal bar graph looks something like this, right, where we've got bars, something like that. That's not a percent bar graph, guys. This right here is an example of a percent bar graph. And I want you to look at mine on the screen because mine's in color, looks better than yours on your paper. Notice you can see it goes from 100% to 100%. And then it's been split. You guys see that? It's been split into the categories, and then do you see how there's a key so that you can see what represents what? But everything is on one. And the cool thing about a percent bar graph is that you can tell by the simple size of each, the chunk, like what's the biggest. You may not know this exact number right there, but you know that this is the biggest, this is the smallest, right? You can see that very easily. Kind of the same things that we can see here. Like this would be the smallest, this would be the biggest on a regular bar graph. Do you have a question?
Another question more, you said that 0% was 100%.
No, I said 0% and 100%. Okay, well, thanks for pointing that out.
So like the action be like 40% and comedy would be.
So hang on, let's hold on to that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is come up here to this first example, and we're actually going to build one. Okay, so it says using the relative frequency table, create a percent bar graph. So first, start by making a bar. Did you make a bar? Okay. And you can see we're looking at the relative frequencies here on the table. For cheetah, it was 30%. So where is 30% on my bar graph? That's right. It's between 20 and 40. So it'd be about here, right? Now, I don't have, well, I do, but you don't have different colors like this one down here. So instead, down here, we want to make ourselves a little key next to each one, okay? So how about for cheetah, we're going to color it all in. Okay? So for cheetah, we're just going to color this all in. Okay? Now, the next piece is leopard. And leopard says 45%. But does that mean that I'm going to come over here and stop at 45% right here? Why not?
That's not how much it is.
That's right, because I'm already at 30, right? So from 30, I need to go forward 45. So where am I going to stop?
75.
At 75. So here would be 70. So we want to go a little bit further to 75, okay? And maybe this time we just put these like lines in here, okay? It doesn't really matter what you put as long as you are, have a key, okay? And then the last piece is lion, and it's supposed to be 25. Is that how much I have left? 25, and maybe this time we just do like some polka dot. numbers right here must total how much?
100.
This must total 100. Make sure that it does. Let's add it up. 7, 8, 9, 10. It has to total 100%. Because otherwise you're not representing all of the data. Okay, does that make sense? I can't, like right now if I'm looking at all my students, I can't say, well, 10% made 100 on the DLA and then 80% made everything else. Because that wouldn't be true, right? Because that only represented what?
90%.
90%. So then your question should be, if that's what I told you, what should your question be to me?
How many people didn't even do it?
Right, that's exactly right. Maybe there's 10% of the class that was absent. Maybe they didn't take it. Maybe they were in blue group. You know what I'm saying? Who knows? But they didn't take it. But all of the class should be represented if we're talking about making a percent bar graph, okay? So do you think a common mistake might be, well, we'll talk about it later, actually. I'll get into that in a minute. Common mistakes. Okay, so now that we've made one, now let's talk about reading one, okay? When you just look at this one, it just wants you to summarize, what can you get from this graph?
Action is the most.
Yes. Fraction is the most. Give me a better math word.
The greatest. Action is the most.
There we go. Because it's the most common, most popular, it is our mode. You see? What else could you draw from that? Drama. Yeah, it's the least popular. Okay? And so now I've got a question that's not on your paper. It says, how can I find out how many comedy and drama movies Kevin has if he had a total of 275 movies? Well, we're going to say that comedy is 23% and drama is 9% because it's hard to tell this from this kind of fake. So I'd like for you to talk with a partner. If you're at home, pause the video. Okay, guys, tell me where you're starting with this question. Where are you starting? Tell me. You can stay there. Stay there.
All right.
Oh,
You can stay.
Like
We're reading the proportion.
okay, so we need a proportion. Tell me the numbers that are going to go in my proportion.
So 275 is the
Okay,
then 100 is the
obviously there.
So and then we did 23 plus 9.
Yeah, is it okay for me to add percents? Can I add percents?
Yeah.
Yes, because remember, the reason why I can do that is because technically this is 0.23 and this is 0.09, right? Which would be 0.32, which then I would go back to 32%. See what I'm saying? So it's fine, okay? And then that goes here. And then what? Was anybody stuck at this point?
No.
Oh, good. What'd you do?
Times 2 times 2.75.
Really?
Yeah.
Did everybody do times 2.75?
Yeah.
Okay. Can anybody think of a different way from here?
You could simplify it.
Yeah, I would also see simplifying. What would you divide by? 4. Because 25s are easy to deal with, right? Every 100 has how many 25s? 4. So 200 would be 8. And how many 25s are in 75? 3. So 8 and 3 would be 11. So then you would do times 11, which is 88, right? Right? Did I do it wrong? And so, or if you did 32 times 2.75, that's lovely. You can come over here and do this fabulous work like I'm doing, right?
Fabulous work.
But look how much longer that took me is all I was going to say. Versus when you simplified, we were able to do all the math in our head. So to me, I'm always trying to do as much as I can in my head. There is nothing wrong with this right here. It's fine. Yes, ma'am.
Another way to do, you could do 100 divided by 0.32.
Say it again.
100 divided by 0.32, then 275 divided by 0.32.
Oh, yeah. She's saying to go this way. Then that would be divide by what? 0.32. And then that. But again, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? Ugh. Because I'm thinking that looks even harder, right? Okay. All right, now, so on the next page, first there's an edit I need you to make. This is actually on the back page where it's got this tally mark thing. For some reason, yours only has 7 tallies for pink, but it's supposed to have 10. So make this edit. Under pink, make it be 10. I'm not really sure how that got off, but I have a feeling it's going to make your data a lot easier to work with. Okay, so I'd like for you to work with a partner right now. Let's see, we got plenty of time for about, I'm thinking 7 minutes or so, and then we're going to check. All right. Okay. So on the first one, basically they just said things like that homeroom 120 has the most students not receiving an allowance, while most do receive an allowance in room 122, but 121 was like 50-50. It's not exact, you know, there's not like an exact thing there. Did anybody write anything different here on A? Everyone wrote exactly that. I find that hard to believe.
Well, not exactly that,
But basically, okay. Oh, you read the percentages, okay. And then on B, they said about half the time was spent at practice and about 40% was doing homework. You might have also said like chores was the least, practice was the most, something like that, okay. Let's look at the next one. See, to me, for this, I'm not a huge fan of it because it's a very open-ended question. Yeah. Guys, on a test, this is not how it's going to look. On a test, it's going to say, which of the following statements is true? And then you just go through and see if that's true. Much easier, okay? Let's look at the next one. The mode was clothing. Did you guys get that?
yes,
Okay, the relative frequency of each type. Did you get 38% for clothing?
yes,
22% for electronics?
Yes.
10% for thrift?
yes,
And 30% for toy?
yes.
And then your bar graph, I know yours doesn't have colors, but as long as you had some kind of a key next to your thing over here with dots or whatever, how did we do?
I'm still making time. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions about it? I know you weren't done, but we don't have questions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then how about the last one? Did y'all get to the last one?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. So some yes, some no. Here's the last one. It wanted to know the relative frequency for each color.
I got it correct.
So that's why we needed to add those tallies, because this made the total 50, correct? Which then of course made it way easier to do the work. And then we had to create a percent bar graph. So check your answers. Which one represented the mode? What percentage represents the mode, guys?
Blue.
Blue, because
It has
it was the most, right? Okay.
we have